I know I need to live my life with the challenge of sometimes not knowing what the next day is going to bring, not knowing how I'm going to be at something. To me, that's how we really learn. We can always do the things that we're comfortable with and have a lot of knowledge in, but how much are you really learning?
I'm Amy Jo Martin. Welcome to the Why Not Now show. You know that thing you've been thinking about doing? Yeah, that one. Why not now? Have you ever actually taken the time to ask yourself, what's stopping me? Let's talk it through. This is your chance to give that idea the attention it deserves and take action. Each episode, I have a chat with a fascinating person, from entrepreneurs to athletes, celebrities, my parents, rocket scientists, and all walks of life. We talk through a critical time when they've asked themselves, why not now? We dissect that day or even that moment, step by step. Just let go. I am really excited about today's episode with Jessica Mendoza. She has become the first female analyst for nationally televised Major League Baseball games, and she's also a gold medal Olympian. If you are a baseball fan, you've probably seen her on ESPN's Sunday Night Baseball. Her partner is Alex Rodriguez. Jessica and I chat about so many different things in this episode. She has definitely paved the way for a lot of new things that haven't happened before, innovation. It's pretty cool when you see Billie Jean King congratulating her on Twitter for the things that she's doing. What I really appreciate about Jessica is she is as real as it gets. She does not paint the picture as if her life is perfect, and she's doing a ton and definitely has been extremely successful, has a wonderful family, but she said at times it's a shit show. She said it doesn't have to be balanced in terms of life in general. She tells us a story, a why not now story, about her husband leaving his big job to help her and their thought process, how they navigated that decision from idea to action, and how they just looked at it as this could be temporary. What's the worst case scenario? Throughout Jessica's career, athletically and professionally, as a personality now on television, she said constantly she's been faced with these opportunities to do something she absolutely didn't know anything about. And that's when these nerves would set in, but she knows that every time she has these nerves, something pretty cool is about to happen. So her motto is say yes and figure it out. One of the things that I can definitely relate to and I love about Jessica's message is there are things that have popped up in her pathway as opportunities that she said she didn't know were goals of hers. And if she hadn't been open-minded and willing to at least check them out, she would have never been able to realize these goals that she didn't realize she had. Jessica and I recently spoke on a panel together, and someone in the audience asked her how she's dealt with navigating a male-dominated industry and how she's dealt with being treated differently at times. Her answer was gold. You will hear it here today. And of course, because I'm expecting, I asked her for any advice as it relates to transitioning into motherhood as a entrepreneur and someone who travels often. She also had some very innovative advice, and it's something that I didn't even realize was an option. So I hope you find that valuable as well. Jessica is a true pioneer. She's a trailblazer, and she is making history. There is so much to learn from her. Just a heads up, the fall 2019 Renegade Brand Bootcamp dates will be announced soon, and enrollment will be opening up. If you want to be the first to hear of this, then just head to renegadebrandbootcamp.com and scroll down, and you can give us your email, and we'll be sure to let you know as soon as the information's released. If you're not familiar with the Renegade Brand Bootcamp, you can check everything out at the URL renegadebrandbootcamp.com. We tackle the most taboo topics on the Why Not Now show. Oftentimes, you're hearing guests share things they've never shared before. In the spirit of things we don't typically talk about, you should know that the Why Not Now show is supported by Poopery, the original before you go toilet spray. It's magic. My friends at Poopery have literally taken the smell out of you-know-what. This pure blend of essential oils stops bathroom odor before it begins. Visit poopery.com, and Why Not Now listeners get 20% off with code WHYNOTNOW. That's all one word. And you can hear the story about Poopery in our interview with founder Susie Batiste. That's Why Not Now, episode 28. Poopery is also available at Bed Bath & Beyond. Jessica, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for joining us. And let's hop right in, as we typically do. Can you tell me about a time when you had a big decision to make and you asked yourself, why not now?
Wow. Well, I know this is kind of cheating because I feel like there's been two of those moments. Well, there's been a lot of those moments, but two that stand out the most to me. The first is, and it was more of a partnership decision when my husband and I decided for him to quit his job as a civil engineer to jump into my career full time. And it was a very, very scary moment just because at the time the thought was temporary and that we wouldn't, commit to just one income, like just the thought of it all being on me. At that point we had our son. So I have two kids, but we had one and he was only, I think, a month old. And it was for me to be able to play pro softball, which, by the way, is not this huge lucrative, deal where I'm signing this $1 million contract. So, of course, it would make sense for my husband to quit his job and support me. It was like really just making a normal wage and hoping that sponsorships and where that would lead. But it would allow us to move across the country and travel all over that's required to be a pro softball player. And when we decided to do that, I mean, it literally was like, should we wait? Maybe wait for a better time. And I feel like that's always the question that comes up, right? Whether it's even having children, a career decision, something that's really big, and you want to find that perfect time, right? Mm-hmm. That never exists. And Amy Jo, you know this, right? Yes. And I found that actually the longer you wait, the more impossible it becomes. Because I just feel like then the excuses pile up of why you can't do it. And so we said, let's do this. Let's do it today. And he put in his 2-week notice at work, a job that he had, built himself up to being at a pretty high position, and we went for it. And that was, 9 years ago. And he's a stay-at-home dad, and my career has now, taken off beyond just pro softball, but obviously with ESPN and all my work with Major League Baseball. And I never would have been able to even have those doors open and walk through them had I not known that we could do it as a family with my husband staying at home and making that decision. So that was probably the biggest why not now moment of my life.
Huge, absolutely. And impacting obviously your entire family. But you said we decided that day. So was it kind of the same day? I'm sure this had been brewing in some way, but it sounds like the seriousness, when those conversations go from a thought to reality, and then it sounds like you crossed the starting line very quickly.
Yeah, I mean, there was real fear. I think what our one little cushion was, okay, he can always go back to work. So we kind of put that out there, like, this isn't forever. In fact, I think it was around October. So we're like, you know what, let's see through the end of the year. And you see how he feels. I mean, women do this all the time, but for a man to quit his job and fully just dive in to be like, okay, my wife is going to be the breadwinner and she's the one that's going to support us and I'm going to be at home. And we kind of just wanted to see how that would go. And so in January, he talked about maybe looking at other jobs, other, just more flexible jobs and maybe getting back into work. And so we kind of had that like 3 month, like, okay, but there's still like an option here, and I think that helped us a little bit, at least give us that fake sense of, okay, let's jump, but there might be a life raft down the river a little bit if we can't swim anymore. The important thing is we had to jump. Like it wasn't okay, let's kind of just see if maybe you should consider not working somewhere down the road. And those conversations, which, I think we all still have them. But there's a power in now. Your question is perfect because it is, why not now? And I think there's always an answer to that. There's you can think of a million reasons why not now. But for me, it's more about, let's do this now, and then we figure out how to answer all those reasons instead of trying to figure it out and make it perfect.
Yeah. When you mentioned your conversation, bringing up the fact that this could be temporary, it's like, what's the worst thing that could happen? That I think is it breathes life into the idea and making it a reality when there are very few things in life that are permanent, right? Like this, we can make a change if we need to type of situation. So we talk a lot about a quote on this podcast from Julius Caesar, who said, if you want to take the island, you burn your boat. And what a good example of reaching out to your employer and saying, okay, I'm giving my notice. Like that's the ultimate boat burning kind of moment. So, and it did. Look at what happened over the last, 7, 8+ years for your career, where you are now, and having pioneered in areas that for so long were, always the same. And it was always the guys and always the men. And here you are, the first in history, the first woman in history to serve as a national televised analyst for MLB games. And this is just, I feel like you've only just begun. So can you talk a little bit about that transition too? And for the listeners, a little bit of context. Jessica and I had the opportunity to speak together at an event on the same panel. And, some of the things that you shared about these situations that you would be in, where it was like, there was no one in front of you to look at their playbook. You just had to figure this out yourself. But this move in 2015 to becoming on that stage and going from the field to the box, tell us about that and how it all played out.
It never plays out how you think it does. Like I'll get asked a lot, like, how do I get, what steps do I need to take to be able to maybe be in this position or be on television or, and it's interesting because everyone's story is different. And sometimes it's just kind of taking opportunities as they come and not really knowing where they're going to lead. And you end up somewhere where you really had no idea. Like you see some path and then you're like, wait, I thought I was going this way. And you end up totally in a different direction. I graduated from Stanford wanting to be a politician and change our education system. I had an internship in DC and that was my plan. And I ended up making the Olympic team, which deterred that for about 10 years. But in that process, I had my degree and that's what I was going to do when I was done playing. Well, I didn't realize I was getting interviewed for a World Cup game. And after the interview, an ESPN producer was just like, you would be great on television. Like you have so much passion and energy and the way you describe the game. Would you ever consider getting involved in television? And I kind of just started laughing because I was like, okay, no filter, microphone in front of me. Like I'll get fired first day. There's no way. Like... But then I kind of thought, I'm like, I have no experience in this. I mean, like none. Like my background was like political science, American studies, like educational reform. Like that's not exactly prepping you for being in front of a TV at all. But I was like, what's the worst that can happen? I realized that I was right and that I wasn't supposed to do this and that I'm bad at it. Great. At least I tried. And I feel like that was one of my first times of just like realizing, because I think especially as women, we always want to be perfectly prepared. Okay, yes, I will do this, but let me go study this and let me research and let me do all this stuff and then call me back like a couple years and then I'll be ready and I'll do it. And I feel like the best things that are going to happen to you are when you're like, I have no idea how to do this, but I'm not going to tell you that. And I'm just going to say yes. And then I'm going to figure it out as I go. And that was one of those times as I said yes. And then I was like, oh crap, like what happens next? And I That was obviously just college softball games, but still, it was a really big deal for me. And that entered me into the television world. From there, it pushed more as I started to see men doing softball games. I was like, why can't women do baseball games? Then I saw Julie Foudy doing Men's World Cup as a female soccer player. I saw Doris Burke as a women's basketball player doing men's basketball games and doing it so well. And I was like, why isn't this happening? So I started to push more at ESPN, and they were really receptive. It took a while to break into the booth part of it, but I was able to kind of enter into baseball, what I call like the side door, as a reporter. So I was a Major League Baseball reporter, which that's when you see women. So it was very easy, and like not easy for me to do it, but easy like for people to understand it. Like, oh yeah, of course a woman would be on the sideline.
Before. Oh yeah. Uh-huh.
Yeah, this happens all the time. Like, yes. And it was one of my bosses at ESPN that just was like, you know what? If you really want to be an analyst and be seen as an analyst, which is different from a reporter. A reporter is there obviously to report the news and interviews and provide stories. An analyst is someone that's in the booth usually, and they're breaking down the how and the why of what's happening on the field. And usually those are all ex-players. So I was just told, like, if you want to be really taken seriously as an analyst, you have to make this geographical change of like 100 yards from going from the sideline to the booth. And I was like, all right, let's do it. And that was in 2015. And my world kind of changed the moment I stepped into that booth.
And now you sit next to Alex Rodriguez. He's one of your partners, right, up there, and you're doing something that hasn't been done before. And when we spoke at this event in Denver, you talked a little bit about, someone had asked the question, how did you navigate the male-dominated situation? Because there were times where you felt like you were treated differently, right? I hope I'm not putting words in your mouth, but from what I recall with your answer, and you shared your strategy. Do you remember what you said?
I felt like, for the most part, most players and managers were just awesome. Like, they got it. Usually they had a daughter or a sister or someone that played softball and that they respected as an athlete. So when I would come in and talk hitting, it was like, okay, this makes sense. It was more of just the, social media and, fans of the game and people that were in a lot of ways faceless, right? They hide behind like an egghead on social media or, not a real name, but like a screen name. So you never know who they are. And that's where I think the real resistance came from. I never had anyone come up to me and blatantly say, I don't want you here because you're a woman. But I did have that happening in and around, all the reactions after I would come onto a game. So I think my biggest way of handling it is to realize who the people that mattered. Obviously my family, but the people who hire you, people you work with, as long as they respected me and wanted me there, I didn't need to listen to all the negativity that was out there. But it's hard. I mean, Amy Jo, I'm sure you go through this where sometimes we focus more on what's negatively said about us instead of the positive. It's easy to gloss over like, oh, she's great and smart and I love what she has to say. Like, I would just kind of blow past that. It would be the one person, but it was never just one, but you'd get a few positive, and then as soon as that one would come through that was like, she's awful, I don't like her voice, she's a woman, women don't belong in baseball. And I would just want to know who these people were and to talk to them and be like, okay, it's 2000, whatever, 15, 16, 17. Like, what are we doing here, people? Like, I get if you disagree with what I said about Mike Trout's stance, but that means you actually listen to me. So until you listen to me and you're just going to look at me or hear me as a female, then I think your opinion just has to be ignored. And that was easier said than done, because it definitely was a hard path to be able to finally be able to tune out a lot of that and focus on the most important people that mattered. And those were the ones around me and the ones that hired me.
Right. No, I agree. I think the conversation around it sometimes is more of the hype, or when people would say, how did you do XYZ as a female? And I'm like, what do you mean? It's putting yourself into a handicap situation if you go into it that way almost. It's like, wait, I didn't really see there being a difference. I didn't feel like I was treated that differently, really, which I know isn't the case for everyone. But I think a lot of it is the mentality. But you also had mentioned, to some people, it's just F it. Like you just cannot, you can't let that even get into your psyche. You remember when it's just like, there's nothing I can do about that.
Yeah, because I think one of the women at the conference asked that, like, how do you, because she was, in corporate America and was in a workspace where she was a high-rising female and found herself, like, slowly the women started dropping off, and she found herself in a lot of rooms where she was the only female. And so she had asked the question, like, how do you handle, like, how you're looked at and feel like your gender is on display every time you walk into a room? And you're right. I got to the point where I was just like, totally, you know what? Screw it. F it. Fill in the blank. I'm pretty sure I said the 4-letter F word.
Yes. And you can hear too.
and I felt it. And I do still, where it's like, you know what? I am. Yes. I've been very aware of my gender my entire life. Like, I don't need to worry about what you have a problem with. And if you're going to notice my gender and have a problem with that, that's not my problem. It's your problem. You can figure out how to deal with that yourself. I'm going to be over here doing my job. I think it's something I still have to remind myself of, but it's important to be able to move through the distractions, because that's really what it is. And it affects you. It affected me anyway, where I would get caught up in that, where I would hear the words that, were said behind my back or said, or the looks, and even read too much into it, like, oh my gosh, I don't belong, oh my gosh, like, and I noticed that I needed to speak when I did, like, I needed to speak with conviction and confidence. And the moment I let those whispers and those stupid tweets get into my head, I spoke with less conviction. And when I would speak, I was doubting myself, even in my voice. And I'm like, okay, this isn't me. You know what? They can't win. They can't get the better of me. And I know who I am. And I'm the person that I believe in myself, and I believe that I do belong. And I'm going to go out and do that every day. And you guys can handle your own problems that you have with me.
We're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back. Hi, everyone. If you are digging this podcast, please subscribe, rate, and review on iTunes. It just takes a moment and it means a ton to us. Also, after recording more than 100 episodes, I've created a bit of a cheat sheet on the top 5 things I've learned from renegades and how they get from idea to action, from dreaming to doing. I will email you the downloadable PDF when you subscribe to my newsletter. Just head to amyjomartin.com and click on Connect with Me. You're in the position you're in because you're good and you know your shit. And I think that's where the confidence is there legitimately, because you know baseball, and that's what you're leaning on. And so I love that, you're now just recently the news of you advising and joining the Mets. Was that something that was a goal of yours? Is that something that kind of happened organically, or how did that kind of all come to be?
It wasn't a goal at all, actually. I feel like that's how a lot of things have happened. It's like you think you're like goal-oriented in one way, and then all of a sudden this thing comes out of nowhere and you're like, okay, that's not what I wanted though. But is that something that I can learn from? Is that something that maybe I fail at and then learn from it through failure? Is it something I succeed at and that becomes my job? Like, you don't know. And I think what really happened is Brodie Van Wagenen, who's the new general manager for the Mets, he was hired last August, September. He went to Stanford. We didn't know each other then, but we've been connected for the last few years. And he was a player agent. I mean, he was a very outside the box hire for a general manager, especially for a New York-based team. And the Wilpons and Fred and Jeff decided to go outside the box in hiring him. And with him came outside the box ideas. And one of those was like, I want to bring Jessica Mendoza on board. I think her being from a different background, meaning that she didn't play Major League Baseball, yet she knows baseball. She talks about baseball. She played softball, so she played at an elite level in her sport. I want to know her opinions. I want to get her advice. I want her to be a part of this front office. And he kind of had to convince me a little and talk to me and kind of pump me up, and was just like, no, Jess, I want you in the room. I want you to be in these decision-making rooms. And I knew for sure there was going to be backlash, but at the same time, there's a part of me that kind of craves like the challenge, the fact that, okay, this is something I don't know. Again, something that I wasn't educated on or was like totally groomed. She's always wanted to be in the front office and this is where she's headed. No, that's not anywhere where I was headed, but here I am. And at the very beginning of it. So I'm excited though, because it's something that I have nerves about. And when I get nerves about something, it usually means it's going to be something pretty cool.
Which brings me to my next topic. But just to circle back on this one, that's the second time that you've mentioned just in this chat, your entrance into television and being in front of the camera. It was something you didn't know either. And that just say yes and then you figure it out. This is a little different because you obviously do know baseball, but it's a role in a goal that you said you didn't have. So I just love that for everyone listening, you don't have to have it all figured out. You don't have to know. It's almost like you have to just build your figure it out muscle even stronger. It brought chills to see Billie Jean King tweet you and congratulate you on this opportunity, and she included hashtag History Matters, and it really does. And so I just thank you for blazing these trails too. Let's talk about the nerves. So you have been on some of the world's biggest stages, whether they're televised or you're on the field. Fear, your relationship with fear, with nerves, big, small. What do you have to share about that?
Well, that's where I feel like Billie Jean King has come into my life in a big way, in a lot of ways. But her mantra, in fact, one of the titles of her book is Pressure is a Privilege. And I feel like once I've learned, and this started like, first at bat of an Olympic Games, and I can't even breathe, right? I'm so nervous. Like that had been a dream, you know what I mean? So you've had that for years and years, like your entire life. And all of a sudden you're here in the crowd and the moment and USA across your chest. And I just remember being like almost completely, what's the word? Like I couldn't even feel my body. I was like useless as an athlete because I had convinced myself because of my nerves that I couldn't even function. And it wasn't until later that I realized it's that pressure, right? Those nerves, all of that it's because there's something really cool happening. And I get the Olympics as like an extreme example because that's like a duh, like this is really awesome. But sometimes it's as simple as, I went and decided to teach PE to my son's third grade class. And I was crazy nervous because I'd never dealt with a bunch of 8 and 9-year-olds. And I didn't know if they were going to like eat me alive or what was going to happen. It could be at like the smallest level to the biggest level. But there's nerves, right? And it's because it's usually going to be something really cool. We don't know what's going to happen. And that's life, right? Like I just, my personality, I don't want to live my life where the outcome all the time, where you're kind of just living in this comfort zone of, yeah, I got this. I know what my day is going to look like tomorrow and the next day. And I'm going to pretty much breeze through each one and kind of got it down. And it's nice to have some of those mixed in, but I know I need to live my life with the challenge of sometimes not knowing what the next day is going to bring and not knowing how I'm going to be at something. And to me, that's how we really learn. We can always do the things that we're comfortable with and have a lot of knowledge in, but how much are you really learning? If you've already not mastered it, but gotten to the point where you really understand it. I think there's so much in our world that it's like, okay, I don't know anything about this. It's okay to say that. And then it's okay to throw yourself into it and say, teach me, help me learn, and you might find out a couple weeks in, okay, great. Not for me, but I did learn something else that's outside of my comfort zone. And I learned a little bit more about me along the way. And so that's what the nerves now tell me. Before it used to just completely inhibit me to where I couldn't do anything because I was so nervous. And now it's gotten to where my mind just starts to get excited. Like, okay, you're nervous. And yeah, my heart rate still goes up and I get all sweaty and I can't change that, right? But then I just kind of smile because I think, you know what, this is a pretty cool opportunity in front of me.
An indicator. It's a signal that something pretty cool is about to happen or can happen. That's awesome. And just kind of the last topic here, Jessica, you do a lot. You work obviously some non-traditional hours given what you do. You're traveling. You have 2 kids. Time management and how you keep a level head as you are not knowing what the next day is going to bring and have a fairly alternative schedule. What are some of your tips and tricks or things that that help you navigate your day?
I think just understanding that it doesn't have to be balanced. I feel like there's this idea that we as moms, as working moms, that, we're going to have dinner on the table and my hair's done and I'm looking hot and the kids are sitting there and they're eating their vegetables and my work's done for the day and kiss my husband on the cheek and there you go. Like, laundry's done. Like, no, I mean, it's a shit show, and not all the time, but like there's days where like kids are screaming and fighting and like pulling each other's hair out. I'm missing a conference call because I can't get them in line, and we're doing takeout tonight, and I got hair all over and maybe some throw up on my shirt, and that could be a day, that could be Tuesday. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And not putting the pressure on myself that there's something wrong with me, that there's this expectation that we need to live up to be this perfect working mom, or just even this perfect anything. Fill in the blank, but I think there is an image that is out there. And whether that's because I miss, a field trip, or I'm not there, for certain things in and around my kids' lives, that you get judged by other moms, and other dads too. I think even when I'm on the road, I'll get asked, wait, you're here at spring training, where are your kids? I'm like, they're at home. And they're like, oh my gosh, how are you away from them right now? And more times than not, the person asking me the question is a father. And I'm like, how are you away from your children right now? And it's just amazing to me how the idea of being a mom means that I can't ever have anything that's mine, my career, my life, but men can. That it's totally okay if you want to go and have this amazing career. And if it happens to take you away from your children at times, then that's totally fine. I think everyone is different, and it's who you are and how that life and work balance and imbalance plays out. I mean, I have this amazing husband that is at home with my kids. We do homeschool half the time, or it's half the week. We do a hybrid homeschool. So I bring the kids on the road with me a lot. And for me, I work weekends. And so, because I do Sunday night baseball. So I'm gone every Saturday, Sunday from the end of March till the beginning of November. That's a lot of weekends to miss, especially once your kid's in school. So I decided to homeschool. So when I come home on Mondays, I have my weekend with the kids. And it's pulling hair out, doing it, math and science and English and, all the different things that we do. But then I get to be with them all day. That's helped us. So that's how we navigate it. And I think everyone is different. I mean, people think I'm crazy because it's like, wait, you come home and then you homeschool your kid. Like, what is wrong with you? And
it works.
That's what's right with me. Like, that's what makes my world go round. And like I said, it ain't pretty. It's not perfect, but I wouldn't change it.
Thank you for sharing that. It's such sound advice, and it's innovating to what makes sense for you. And that's just another area that you're pioneering and doing things that may not seem the norm, but it works. And hopefully people listening to this will be like, oh, well, have I thought of that? This is another option I didn't realize I even had. So a couple rapid fire questions, and then we'll let you go. What's one lesson that you find yourself learning over and over, Jessica?
Gosh, one lesson. I know it's supposed to be rapid fire.
That's okay. We can come back to it too if you want to bookmark that.
No, I feel like one lesson I'm learning over and over is, gosh, there's tons of those, but I would say just knowing who I am, finding out constantly. I feel like I'm challenged with that all the time because I'm on television, and so there's an image and there's all these things that you're trying to be, and you can get lost in that. And so a reminder that I feel like I'm always learning, and a lesson that's always coming back that I feel like I found in high school was kind of owning who you are and being okay with who that person is. And I know that sounds like, of course you want to do that, but there's times when I feel like I need to look a certain way or act a certain way. And then I'm like, wait, hold on. I'm always telling young girls, own who you are. Forget the makeup, forget the, body image, own you, that your strength, your smarts, everything about you. Put that out there. And if it's different, then the more different, the better. But sometimes our society, it's everyone wants you to fit in specific boxes. And I just sometimes have to fight my way out of the box, blow up the box, kick it down, whatever it takes to remind myself. And then, of course, the people around me that no, I don't go there. I'm me. And I don't really fit into one box, let alone 2, 3, or 4. I mean, I'm kind of just out here in the world just like you. And so I'd say that and I get all empowered and I'm like, yes, and this is who I am. And then all of a sudden, like a month later, here I am again, just like checking Instagram and like, oh, why isn't and I'm like caught up in it. I think a battle I'll go through the rest of my life and just have to look myself in the mirror and be like, no, this is who you are. And this is who you're proud of. And you're smart, amazing, beautiful, all of these things. And you belong where you are, and shout that from the rooftops. And it might not be what everyone wants to hear, but this is who you are.
Yeah. Or maybe it's just a practice. There's no end game. It's just that constant practice. Thank goodness that you aren't boxing yourself. You wouldn't be doing what you're doing right now.
And being okay with, I think, the evolution of ourselves too, is knowing that I'm not the same person I was when I was 15. And there are so many similarities, don't get me wrong, but that like I'm constantly evolving. So then also checking in with that too and being like, you know what? Maybe that I don't want to do this anymore. And this is something I want to change gears and go this direction. As long as it's me and being conscious of that, we're always going to be constantly changing, as long as it's not being influenced by, social media or what you feel like is the image that you're supposed to be. Because I feel like that can get confusing of, okay, I'm changing, but am I changing for me or am I changing for somebody else?
Mm-hmm. Oh, it's a slippery slope, and that brand and image can start to elbow out the real us, and then we're in no man's land, and it can get very confusing as to, okay, wait, I need to get back to who am I?
That's why your story has inspired me so much. And honestly, sitting on stage with you after having heard you as a keynote speaker at the ESPNW Summit like 5 years ago, I was like, oh my gosh, look at this road that you've been on. And it made me feel so good that I wasn't alone, that I was like, okay, like, look at her. She's completely 180, and not her, like who she is, but just like her goals and her career and what her objectives were. And it's always changing. And maybe sometimes we change too much the wrong way. And now it's bringing ourselves back to who we are.
Oh, exactly. Well, it's been interesting too, just to hear you. Two of my big takeaways. We won't do any more rapid fire because we got to end on this note because it's just the most important, right? Just the fact that you said, I didn't know it was a goal with some of these things. And thank goodness you were open-minded enough to explore, and also not knowing how to do something, but still saying yes. Like that has been a consistent theme, it sounds like, for you, and aligned too with what I believe. And I just want to thank you so much for your time, Jessica, and joining us and just what you're doing. I mean, in general, it's important work, and thank you.
Amy Jo, thank you. I was excited just for us to kind of catch up, even if it's on a podcast.
Exactly. Well, I will be following your journey, and we'll be in touch, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks.
Hey everyone, thanks for listening to the show. Hit me up on social media to let me know what you think. I'm at Amy Jo Martin on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And I want to hear your Why Not Now moments so I can share them on the show. Just send me a note to whynotnow@amyjomartin.com. For show notes and other offers, you can visit amyjomartin.com/whynotnow. And while you're there, don't forget to sign up for my email newsletter for exclusive content and announcements. A big thanks to Rock Salt Music for all of the tunes by the talented John Coggins. And of course, a hat tip to Richard Brewer for editing and producing the show. I'll see you next time. And until then, why not now?